Steven, 30-something. Work as a senior software developer for a decent-sized tech company. The pay is good, the work is challenging, it's a stable gig. Can't complain about the job itself, but the people, well, that's another story. My team is pretty small, about 6 of us in a little cubicle cluster. We're the guys who handle the back-end systems for our main product. Mostly dudes in their late 20s to early 40s. Everyone is competent, quiet, and just wants to get the work done and go home. We have a good rhythm, a sort of unspoken understanding. We help each other out, we don't step on toes, we just code. Our manager Jason is fine. He's one of those non-technical managers who got promoted because he's good at corporate speak. His main strategy is to avoid conflict at all costs. As long as the project deadlines are met, he doesn't look too closely at how the sausage gets made. This becomes important later. For about 2 years, our team was a well-oiled machine. Then, about a year ago, corporate decided we needed to diversify our talent pool. That's when Sandra joined the team. She was a lateral hire from another department, someone who had apparently been very vocal in company-wide meetings about the lack of female representation in the tech divisions. On her first day, she walks in like she owns the place. She introduces herself not by talking about her skills or experience, but by announcing how excited she is to bring a new perspective to our homogeneous environment. Red flag, numero, GIF. The rest of us just kinda nod and smile, the standard professional welcome. We're not hostile. We just want to see if she can do the work. That's all that matters. It didn't take long to figure out her whole deal. The first week she spent more time decorating her cubicle with inspirational posters than learning our code base. Posters with slogans like, "A woman's place is in the revolution," and "Smash the patriarchy." Whatever, you do you. Just pull your weight. The first real problem started a few weeks in. We were working on a system update, and she was assigned a relatively simple module, basically just writing a script to automate some data transfers. An intern could have done it in a day. After 2 days of her staring intently at her screen and sighing dramatically every 5 minutes, she rolls her chair over to my desk. She's got this flustered look on her face, like she's just been wrestling a bear. She explains that she's having trouble with the rigid logic of the scripting language. She says her brain is more wired for holistic, creative problem solving, not this kind of linear, masculine thinking. I'm just sitting there, blinking. My brain is trying to process what she just said. Did she really just gender a programming language? But I'm a team player, right? So I tell her to show me what she's got. I look at her code. It's a complete mess. Basic syntax errors everywhere. Instead of pointing that out, which would probably trigger some kind of HR incident, I just start fixing it. I walk her through the logic, step by step. She's not really listening. She's nodding along, but her eyes are glazed over. She's more interested in telling me how the whole system is unnecessarily complex and designed by men, for men. I spend a solid hour debugging her 10 lines of code. Finally, it works. She claps her hands together and says, "See, we did it. Teamwork. I did it. I did all of it." She then sends an email to Jason, our manager, CCing the whole team, praising my collaborative spirit, and talking about how great it is when male colleagues act as allies to help women overcome systemic barriers in tech. Jason replies with a, "Great to see this kind of teamwork." I just felt dirty. Like I'd been used in some weird corporate psychodrama. That was the beginning of the pattern. Every time Sandra was assigned a task that required actual technical skill, the same performance would play out. She'd struggle loudly, talk about how her unique skill set wasn't being properly utilized, and then enlist one of the guys to collaborate with her. We all took turns being the designated ally. Nobody wanted to, but nobody wanted to be the guy who said no and got branded as not a team player, or worse. It was easier to just do her work for her and get back to our own. Jason never noticed or never wanted to notice. Her name was on the finished module, so in his mind, she did the work. It got worse. She started getting involved in things beyond our team. She joined the company's Diversity and Inclusion Committee. Suddenly, she was an expert on workplace culture. During our team meetings, she would constantly interrupt technical discussions to inject some commentary about the unconscious bias in our project planning. One time, we were debating the merits of 2 different database technologies. a purely technical discussion about performance, scalability, and cost. Sandra raises her hand and, with a very serious expression, asks if we've considered how our choice might perpetuate a culture of exclusion. We all just stared at her. She went on a 5-minute tangent about how one of the technologies was developed by a company with an all-male board, and choosing it would be sending the wrong message. Jason, of course, nods thoughtfully and says, "That's a very valuable perspective, Sandra. Thank you for raising that." We wasted 15 minutes on that. We ended up choosing the superior technology anyway, but the incident left a bad taste in everyone's mouth. It felt like we couldn't even do our jobs without walking through a minefield of her personal politics. The real kicker was how she handled any kind of physical task. About 6 months into her tenure, we got a new server rack delivered. It was a big, heavy piece of equipment that needed to be moved from the loading dock to our server room. A few of us got together to move it. Sandra sees us getting ready to lift it and lets out a little laugh. She says something like, "Oh, I'll leave you boys to do the heavy lifting. I just get in the way." Then she winks and says, "Don't want to break a nail." And she just walks away to get a coffee. Nobody said a word. We just moved the rack. But I remember looking at my colleague, a guy named Mark, and we just shared a look of pure, unadulterated, "Are you kidding me?" Here's a woman who lectures us weekly about gender equality, about how she's just as capable as any man. But the second an actual physical task comes up, she plays the damsel in distress card and makes jokes about it. The hypocrisy was stunning. Her requests for help started becoming more brazen. She stopped even pretending to try first. She'd just assign her work to us, disguised as a question. "Hey, Steven, I'm working on the API integration for the new client. Can you handle the authentication token part? You know that stuff so much better than I do." It wasn't a request, it was a delegation, and she did it to everyone. We were effectively doing the work of 6 people, while she, the 6th member, acted as some kind of project manager, moral compass, who didn't produce any actual code. Things came to a head during one particularly brutal quarter. We were all working late, trying to hit a major deadline for a product launch. The stress was high, people were canceling plans, coming in on weekends. Everyone except Sandra. On the Thursday before the launch, with the whole team running on fumes, she sends an email to Jason and the team. Subject: prioritizing mental health. The email explained that she was feeling overwhelmed by the high-pressure, male-dominated energy of the office and needed to take a mental health day on Friday to recharge her feminine energy. She literally used the phrase feminine energy. She ended the email by saying she had full confidence that the team could carry the project over the finish line without her. We were speechless. She was bailing on us the day before the most critical deadline of the year, and she framed it in a way that made it impossible to object. If you question her mental health day, you're an insensitive monster who doesn't care about well-being. Jason, terrified of an HR complaint, immediately replied, "Of course, Sandra, take all the time you need. Your health comes first." So that Friday, we were down a person, and we had to pick up all the unfinished tasks she'd left behind. We all had to stay until after midnight, fixing bugs in her sloppy, half-finished code. I remember sitting there at 11 p.m., staring at a bug that was entirely her fault, and just feeling this cold rage build inside me. This wasn't about teamwork or support anymore. This was a parasitic relationship. We were being taken for a ride, and our manager was letting it happen. The us versus her mentality really started to solidify after that. Before, it was just individual annoyance. Now, the guys on the team started talking, quietly at the coffee machine or in the hallway. "Can you believe the nerve? How does she get away with this? Jason is useless." We were all on the same page, but nobody knew what to do. Going to HR seemed like a death sentence. We were a group of guys complaining about the one woman on the team. We knew exactly how that would be framed. We'd be labeled the problem, so we just kept our heads down and seethed in silence. We developed a system of covering for her that was brutally efficient. We didn't even wait for her to ask anymore. We'd see what tasks were assigned to her, and we'd just proactively divide them up amongst ourselves. It was easier than dealing with her performance of learned helplessness. In a sick way, the team became even more cohesive because of our shared burden. We were united in our silent resentment of Sandra. Meanwhile, Sandra was thriving. Since our projects were always successful because we were doing her work, she looked great on paper. She got a glowing performance review from Jason. She even got a small Excellence in Teamwork award from the company. She posted a picture of the award on her LinkedIn with a long post about how proud she was to be a woman in tech and thanking her amazing male allies for their support. I almost threw my phone across the room when I saw it. This went on for months, a slow, grinding, soul-crushing routine. We'd come in, do our jobs, do her job, and go home. Then came the Apex project. This was the biggest project our team had ever been given, a complete overhaul of our main client's entire back-end infrastructure. It was a multi-million-dollar contract, a make-or-break deal for our department. The pressure was immense from day one. We had a 6-month timeline, and every single day counted. Jason was more stressed than we'd ever seen him. At the project kickoff meeting, Jason laid out the architecture and started assigning the core modules. He assigned modules based on our strengths. I got the database management system, Mark got the API gateway, and so on. Then he got to the central processing module. This was the heart of the whole system, the most complex, most critical piece of the puzzle. Everything else plugged into it. If this module failed, the entire system was dead. Jason hesitates for a second, then says, "And the central processing module will be handled by Sandra." A stunned silence fell over the room. You could have heard a pin drop. We all looked at each other. This had to be a joke. Giving the most vital piece of the most important project to the most incompetent person on the team? It was insanity. Sandra, however, beamed. She looked around the room, a triumphant smile on her face. She said, "Thank you, Jason. I appreciate you trusting me with this responsibility. It's time a woman was given the chance to lead a core component on a project of this magnitude." What could we say? Jason had made his decision. Our theory was that he was terrified of her accusing him of sexism if he didn't give her a major role, so he handed her the keys to the kingdom, hoping for the best. We knew what was going to happen. There was no way she could build that module by herself, and we knew who would end up actually building it. Us. For the next few months, the project was a nightmare. We were all working our tails off on our own modules, while simultaneously trying to build Sandra's module for her. She'd collaborate with us constantly. She'd call meetings to brainstorm ideas, which was just her getting us to design the logic for her. She'd send us snippets of broken code, asking for our feedback, which was really just a request for us to fix it. We were building an entire system and carrying a dead weight at its very core. The stress was unbelievable. My hair was probably turning grayer by the day. We were falling behind schedule because so much of our time was being diverted to Sandra's module. Jason would ask for status updates, and Sandra would present our work as her own, using all the right buzzwords to sound impressive. Jason, being non-technical, would eat it up. Fast forward to last week. We are 1 day away from the final deadline for the alpha version, the version we have to present to the client. It's all hands on deck. The office is a sea of energy drinks and pizza boxes. We are in pure crunch mode. Everyone is debugging, testing, and integrating the final pieces. Everyone except Sandra, of course. Her module was, predictably, a mess of bugs that were causing cascading failures throughout the entire system. We were all scrambling to fix the problems she had created. Around 5 p.m., when the rest of us were mentally preparing for an all-nighter, Sandra starts packing up her bag. She walks over to my desk with a bright, cheerful smile. It was the most jarringly out-of-place expression in our sea of grim, focused faces. She says, "Hey, Steven, quick favor. I already know where this is going. I've got this super important networking brunch tomorrow morning with some really influential women in the tech industry. I just can't miss it." She gestures vaguely at her monitor. "There are just a few minor bugs left in my module. Could you just iron them out tonight? You're so much faster at debugging than I am." She says it so casually, like she's asking me to pass the salt. It would be a huge help. Think of it as your contribution to advancing women in the workplace. That was it. That was the line. After a year of this nonsense, after months of hell on this project, after covering for her incompetence time and time again, her trying to frame this as some noble act for feminism, something inside me just snapped. The room was quiet. Everyone on the team had heard her. They were all pretending to work, but I knew they were listening, waiting to see what I would do. I slowly took off my headphones and placed them on my desk. I swiveled my chair around to face her directly. I looked her right in the eye, and for the first time in a year, I said the word I should have said a long time ago. No. My voice wasn't loud. It was quiet, flat, and final. The single word hung in the air like a thick smoke. Sandra just stared at me. Her smiling, manipulative mask just melted off her face. For a solid 3 seconds, there was just confusion. A genuine, unscripted, does not compute error message flashing behind her eyes. She had run this script 100 times before, and it always worked. This was a fatal exception she hadn't planned for. Her face went through several stages in quick succession. First, disbelief. She let out a short, nervous laugh, as if I had just told a bad joke. What? Stephen, don't be silly. We're a team. Just help me out here. I didn't say anything. I just kept looking at her with that same flat expression. I didn't move. I didn't blink. The lack of a follow-up response from me is what seemed to break her. The disbelief curdled into indignation. Her face flushed a deep red. Her eyes narrowed. What is your problem? Her voice was suddenly sharp, accusatory. The other guys on the team were frozen. Keyboards fell silent. You could feel the tension in the room spike. Everyone was watching, waiting. This was the moment we had all fantasized about, but never had the guts to initiate. I just calmly said, "My problem is that my work is my priority. Your work is your priority." That was like pouring gasoline on a fire. Her voice started to rise, gaining that shrill lecturing tone she used in meetings. My work? This is the team's project. Are you trying to sabotage this project just to make me look bad? She took a step closer to my desk, leaning in, invading my space. This is exactly the kind of toxic behavior that drives women out of this industry. You feel threatened by a competent woman, so you refuse to collaborate. The irony of her using the word competent was so thick you could have cut it with a knife. I still didn't raise my voice. I leaned back in my chair, creating some distance. It's not collaboration if only one person is working, Sandra. That's when she completely lost it. She threw her hands up in the air and started pacing in the small space between our cubicles. It was a full-blown public performance. Oh, I see. I see what this is. This is a boys' club, and you're all just waiting for me to fail. She gestured around at the other guys, who were all trying their best to look like they were intensely interested in their screens. You can't stand that I was given the lead on a core module. Your ego can't handle it, so you're going to punish me by withdrawing your support. Her voice was now loud enough for the whole floor to hear. People were starting to peek over their cubicle walls. This is a hostile work environment. I'm being targeted because of my gender. I'm going to Jason. I'm going to HR. You will not get away with this. And with that, she spun on her heel and stormed off toward our manager's office, leaving a wake of stunned silence. The second she was out of earshot, my colleague Mark leaned over and just whispered, "Holy crap, dude." I just nodded and took a deep breath. The Rubicon had been crossed. There was no going back. I knew what was coming next. Sure enough, less than 5 minutes later, an instant message from Jason pops up on my screen. "Stephen, can you come to my office, please?" Here we go. I stood up, straightened my shirt, and started the long walk to his office. It felt like walking the Green Mile. Every head I passed turned to watch me. I was the man of the hour for all the wrong reasons. I got to Jason's office. The door was slightly ajar. I could hear Sandra inside, in mid-sentence, her voice thick with fake tears. And he just looked at me with this cold, hateful expression. I've never felt so intimidated in my life. He's trying to force me out. I knocked lightly on the doorframe. Jason looked up, and his face was a mask of pure stress. He looked like a man who just wanted to be anywhere else in the world. "Stephen, come in. Close the door." I stepped inside. Sandra was sitting in the chair opposite his desk, dabbing at her dry eyes with a tissue. She shot me a look of pure venom. I took the other chair, leaving a polite distance between us. Jason cleared his throat and started in on what was clearly a pre-rehearsed, HR-approved script. "Stephen," he began, trying to sound authoritative but just sounding tired. "Sandra has brought a very serious issue to my attention. She feels that you are creating an uncooperative and hostile atmosphere for her on the team." He paused, as if expecting me to immediately apologize and beg for forgiveness. I just waited. He continued. "She says you flat out refused to assist her with a critical component of the Apex project, right before a major deadline. That's not the kind of teamwork we value here." Sandra chimed in, her voice dripping with victimhood. He wants to see me fail, Jason. He's been undermining me for months. Jason looked back at me, his expression pleading. He just wanted me to make this go away. Stephen, whatever personal issues you have, you need to put them aside for the good of the project. We're a team. I need you to go out there and help Sandra finish her module. I took a moment before I spoke. I let the silence hang in the air. I looked at Jason, then I looked at Sandra, then I looked back at Jason. I understand the seriousness of the situation, I said, my voice even and calm. And you're right, this isn't about personal issues, it's about professional conduct and project integrity. Sandra scoffed, but I ignored her. I did not refuse to assist Sandra, I continued. I refused to do her work for her. And there's a very significant difference. Jason started to interrupt, but I held up a hand. Before you say anything else, I think it's important that you have the full context here. This isn't an isolated incident. This is a pattern of behavior that has been going on for a year. I pulled out my phone. I started making notes a while back, just for my own sanity. I think now is a good time to share them. Sandra's eyes widened. This was not part of her plan. Jason just looked confused. I unlocked my phone and opened my notes app. Let's start with a few examples from this project alone. On August 14th, 2 days before the security audit for the new database, Sandra was tasked with implementing the encryption protocols. At 4 p.m., she declared she was ethically uncomfortable, working with what she called data surveillance technology, and left for the day. Mark and I stayed until 3 a.m. to write and implement the code from scratch so our entire project wouldn't be flagged as a security risk. I looked up from my phone. Jason was listening now. Sandra was glaring. On September 3rd, Sandra was supposed to deliver the initial build for the user authentication service. Instead, she called a 2-hour ideation session, where she had the rest of us whiteboard the entire architecture for her. She contributed nothing but buzzwords like synergy and paradigm shift. We designed it. She took the design and presented it as her own. Sandra sputtered. "That's not true. It was a collaborative effort." I continued as if she hadn't spoken. On September 22nd, when the system was crashing due to a memory leak, it was traced back to her module. She insisted the problem was not her code, but a systemic bias in the compiler. It took me half a day to find her bug. It was a basic rookie mistake, a variable left uninitialized. I scrolled down on my phone. Last month, on October 5th, she was tasked with writing the documentation for her module. She argued that requiring written documentation is an outdated practice that gatekeeps knowledge, and that a verbal explanation should suffice. The rest of the team had to write it for her on a Saturday so we would meet the client's requirements. I looked directly at Jason. This has happened on every project she's been a part of. She uses a shield of corporate-approved social justice language to deflect from her own incompetence and offload her responsibilities onto the rest of us. We have been carrying her for a year, Jason. We have been doing her job in addition to our own to keep these projects from failing. I paused, letting the weight of my words sink in. The room was dead silent except for the faint hum of the air conditioning. Jason looked pale. He was no longer looking at me like an employee to be managed, but like a man who was just realizing his house was on fire. Sandra tried one last desperate gambit. The tears started flowing for real this time. "He's twisting everything," she sobbed. "He's collecting evidence against me. This is a witch hunt. I'm a woman in a male-dominated space. Of course I need more support. They should be helping me. Instead, they're creating a dossier to get me fired. This is unbelievable." I put my phone away. "This isn't a witch hunt, Sandra," I said, my voice still calm, but now with an edge of steel. "This is an intervention." I turned my full attention to her. "You came into this team talking about equality. You lecture us about it in every meeting. You demand equal pay, equal respect, and equal opportunities. And you know what? You're right. You should have all of those things." I leaned forward slightly. "We all agree you are our equal. We see you as a completely capable professional developer, just like any of us. And because we respect you as an equal, we are no longer going to insult you by assuming you can't handle your own responsibilities." Her crying stopped. She was just staring at me, mouth slightly open. "From now on, you get to enjoy the full experience of equality on this team. You will be expected to complete your own tasks, debug your own code, and meet your own deadlines, just like the rest of us. We will no longer patronize you by doing your work for you. We are finally going to give you the equality you've been demanding. I finished with, welcome to the team. Silence. Absolute deafening silence. I had taken her entire ideological framework and turned it back on her. I had used her own words, her own stated beliefs, as the justification for my actions. She had no response. What could she say? That she didn't want equality? That she actually wanted special treatment? She just sat there, defeated. The puppet master with all her strings cut. Jason looked back and forth between us. He ran a hand through his thinning hair. I could see the gears turning in his head. On one hand, a crying woman making accusations of a hostile work environment. That's HR's worst nightmare. On the other hand, a senior developer who had just presented a calm, logical, and fact-based account of systemic incompetence that was jeopardizing a multi-million-dollar project. And he had implied that the entire team felt the same way. If he pushed me, he risked a mutiny. The entire project would collapse. He made his decision. He cleared his throat and looked at Sandra. His tone was different now. All the fake sympathy was gone. It was just the flat voice of a manager facing a problem. Sandra, he said, you are the owner of the central processing module. The deadline is tomorrow. You need to ensure your component is fully functional and integrated by then. Her head snapped up. But I need support. He has to. Steven needs to work on his own module, Jason cut her off. As does everyone else on the team. This is your responsibility. Get it done. The finality in his voice was unmistakable. The case was closed. Sandra looked at me one last time. If looks could kill, I'd be a pile of ash. Then she stood up, shoulders slumped, and walked out of the office without another word. Jason just looked at me and sighed. A deep, weary sigh. Don't let this project be late, Steven, was all he said. It won't be, I replied. I stood up and walked out of his office, leaving him to contemplate the mess he had allowed to fester. When I got back to my desk, no one said a word. No one looked at me. But the atmosphere had changed. The oppressive tension was gone, replaced by a quiet, focused energy. Everyone was typing furiously, working with a renewed sense of purpose. I sat down and put my headphones on. For the first time in a year, I could focus entirely on my own work. I saw Sandra at her desk out of the corner of my eye. She was just sitting there, staring at her screen, not typing. She looked lost. The rest of the evening was a blur of coding. We all worked late, but it was different. It was productive. We were a team again. Sandra stayed too. She tried to work. A couple of times, she would start to get up, as if to ask for help. But then she'd see all of us completely engrossed in our work, ignoring her, and she would sink back into her chair. She was completely and utterly alone, adrift in a sea of her own incompetence. Around 10 p.m., I overheard her on the phone, her voice a hushed, frantic whisper. I don't know what to do. It's not working. No, they won't help me. It was a strangely satisfying sound. The next morning, we all came in early to run the final integration tests. Sandra was already there. She looked like she hadn't slept at all. Her desk was littered with empty coffee cups. The moment of truth arrived. We merged all of our completed modules into the main branch. Then, we merged Sandra's, and we ran the build. It failed, catastrophically. Over 500 compilation errors, all originating from her module. It was a complete and total disaster. Her code was so broken it was preventing the entire system from even starting. Jason came over, his face grim. He looked at the screen full of red error messages. He looked at Sandra. What is this? She just mumbled. I don't know. There must be a problem with the system. Mark, our lead architect, just shook his head. No, the problem is here, he said, pointing at the screen. The code is fundamentally broken. The client presentation was in 2 hours. Jason looked like he was about to have a heart attack. He looked at the rest of us. Can you fix this? We all just looked at him. Finally, I spoke up. We can. But we're going to have to rip out her entire module and replace it with the backup prototype we built a month ago. It's not perfect, but it works. A prototype we had built in secret, knowing this day would come. Jason just nodded, defeated. Do it. For the next 2 hours, we worked like surgeons, carefully excising Sandra's toxic code from our system and stitching in our own working replacement. Sandra just stood by, watching, completely useless. A ghost at her own execution. We finished with minutes to spare. The system compiled, it ran, it was stable. The presentation to the client went off without a hitch. They were thrilled. Sandra was not in that meeting. Jason had told her to work from home for the rest of the day. A few weeks passed. An internal post-mortem report on the Apex project was released. It was a dry corporate document, but the message was clear. It detailed the critical failure of a key module and the last-minute heroics of the team to salvage the project. It didn't name names, but everyone knew. The following Monday, Sandra's desk was empty. An email went out from Jason announcing that Sandra had decided to transition to a new role in the marketing department, where her communication skills could be better utilized. We never saw her again. The team is back to how it used to be, quiet, efficient, and professional. The work is still hard, but it doesn't feel draining anymore. A few days ago, Mark stopped by my desk on his way out. He just clapped me on the shoulder and said, "Hey, thanks." That's all he needed to say. I just nodded. And for the first time in a very long time, I left work feeling like I had actually accomplished something. Justice, I guess, is just another word for things finally being put back in their proper order.